In the middle of a crowded hallway, a boy stuck out his foot and sent a new girl's books skidding across the floor. Laughter rose like a wave. He smirked, sure of the crowd, sure of himself, until the quiet girl looked up with eyes that didn't break. He didn't know it yet, but he had just picked a fight with someone whose strength didn't need noise. You'll see how a bully's throne, built on fear, crumbles the moment truth walks in. And when it does, it won't be with a shout. It will be with a door opening at the curb. If you believe dignity should never be optional, tap like to help this message travel. What happens when someone is done performing fear? Let's begin. The bell was still ringing when Amara Johnson slipped through the front doors of Northview High. First day, new schedule, a campus map folded into quiet squares in her hand. She moved the way some people breathe, a steady rhythm, unhurried, like she understood that walking fast didn't make time kinder. Northview had its rituals, seniors nesting on the main stairs, athletes leaning into their lockers as if they were mirrors, a tide of students pulling itself down blue-tiled corridors. Somewhere in that tide flowed Chadwick Miller, called Chad by those who cheered him and by those who feared him. He had the easy stride of a boy who knew where to stand to be seen, and a laugh that could turn any hallway into a stage. Amara kept close to the lockers, mapping the numbers to the printed schedule. Room 112, English. The paper trembled a little in her hand, not from fear, more like first-day electricity. She reached her locker, tried the combination, and felt the lock give. The door swung open with the soft scrape of paint on paint. "Hey," someone said brightly near her shoulder. Layla Torres, a short girl with a careful smile, stood with a stack of textbooks at her hip. "You're new, right? Want help finding—" The sentence broke in two as Chad drifted into the space like he owned it. He didn't speak, not at first. He just looked Amara up and down, a slow elevator of eyes, and then he took one step closer than people take when they mean good things. The crowd around them sensed a show and shuffled into a loose circle. "That your locker?" he said, chin tipping toward the open door. Amara met his gaze. "Yes." "You must be new," he said, smiling without kindness. "We have traditions." Layla's knuckles tightened around her books. "Chad, come on." He ignored her. "Tradition says you say hello properly. Here's how." He shifted his weight, and the movement was so casual you could mistake it for nothing at all, until his shoulder clipped Amara's as he passed. The blow wasn't hard, but it sent her back a half step, her map sliding out of her hand and whispering down to the floor. A ripple of laughter ran through the circle. Phones rose like periscopes. Amara bent to pick up the map. She didn't hurry. When she straightened, she closed her locker with 2 fingers and set the map neatly along the crease, as if nothing important had happened. The quiet in her face made the laughter feel oversized, like a jacket too big for the room. "You're supposed to say, 'Good morning, Northview,'" Chad went on, flashing that grin to the audience. "Want to try again?" Amara's voice was calm. "Good morning." He waited for fluster, apology, anger, any of the currencies he traded in. She offered none. It unsettled him more than a shove might have. A teacher's voice drifted from down the hall. "Phones away, move along." The circle loosened. Layla reached for Amara's map, but Amara had already folded it into a steady square. "Thanks," Amara said to Layla. "You okay?" "I'm okay." Layla hesitated. "He does that to people who don't perform." Her eyes flicked to Chad, now slapping palms with Tyler and Mason, his 2 satellites. Amara nodded once. "I've met the type." They walked toward English, Somewhere behind them, Chad's laughter rose again. That practiced bell that told the school what to think. It didn't ring as loud in Amara's chest as it might have for someone else. She had learned, long before this hallway, that some sounds are just sounds. In room 112, the windows were tall, the desks carved with years of initials. Seats filled quickly. Layla slid into the desk beside Amara's and whispered, "I like your earrings." Amara touched one small hoop. "Thanks." Chad came in late and loud. The teacher's eyes lifted, then lowered with a tired tolerance that said rules apply, but not to all. Chad set himself 3 rows back, where the sightline to Amara was unblocked, and began tapping a pen like a metronome. Tap, tap, tap. Another ritual to mark space with noise. The teacher launched into a get-to-know-you exercise. Share your favorite book and what it taught you. Layla went first. The House on Mango Street. It taught me that small voices tell big truths. Her voice wavered, then found itself. Chad's turn came. He leaned back, balanced on 2 legs of the chair. Favorite book? The playbook, he said, and laughter obliged him. It taught me if you're not first, you're nobody. A few eyes glanced at Amara, as if to measure her reaction. She just wrote her schedule again, copying it neatly into the corner of her notebook the way some people pray, quietly and for themselves. When Amara's turn came, she said, "Brown girl dreaming. It taught me that the quiet can be a kind of thunder if you carry it long enough. No flourish, no glare backward. But the line settled into the room like a seed. Between classes, the corridors swelled again. Chad orchestrated a near collision at the stair, a shoulder brush that was almost a push. Someone snickered. Someone murmured, "Savage." Amara stepped aside and let him pass. She didn't look at him. She didn't have to. He needed her eyes. She didn't need his. By lunch, stories had grown legs. She's rude. She thinks she's better than us. She bumped into him on purpose. The hallway alchemy that turns grains of salt into mountains went to work. This too was a ritual. In schools, truth often starts small, and rumors arrive on roller skates. About 1 in 5 students knows the weight of those skates, the scrape of them on a day that was supposed to be ordinary. Layla found Amara at the edge of the cafeteria, where light fell in squares across the floor. "Sit with me?" "Thanks," Amara said, following. They ate left of center, where voices were softer. Layla chattered because silence felt unfair to a new person. "Do you have people here? Family?" "I do," Amara said. "Enough." Layla waited, the way you wait at the end of a dock to see if someone will step onto your boat. When Amara didn't add more, Layla smiled as if that answer was exactly the right size. "Okay, enough is good." Across the room, Chad was performing. He told a story with his hands about a girl who couldn't take a joke. Tyler and Mason laughed on cue, a little too loud, the way backup singers do when the lead is stretching. Now and then, Chad's eyes slid over to Amara's table, waiting for a flinch. He didn't get one. He mistook that for victory. It was only the opening of a longer game. The final bell released them into afternoon sun. As Amara stepped toward the curb, a breeze carried that clean, hopeful smell a new place can have before you know its shadows. Chad's voice floated after her. "See you tomorrow, Thunder." He meant it as a joke. He had no idea how close he was to the truth she carried. Amara paused at the crosswalk and glanced down the street, measuring distance, measuring breath. Not every day needed to be a battle. Some days only needed to be steps. Behind her, laughter tried again to be a crown. It didn't fit as perfectly as it had that morning. The next morning began with the sound of sneakers on linoleum, the bell chiming once like a starter pistol. Amara Johnson moved through the hallways with that same deliberate pace, head lowered but posture straight. The day before had been marked in everyone's memory. The shoulder hit, the spilled map, the silence that unnerved. High school has a way of turning small moments into legends overnight. By the time Amara reached her locker, she could feel eyes tracing her steps. Not hostile all at once. Curiosity, speculation, the kind that wraps around a new arrival until the story is written for her. The whispers traveled faster than the students themselves. She didn't even say anything when Chad bumped her. She's weird. Probably thinks she's better than us. No, I heard she's dangerous. That's why she's so quiet. Rumors multiply quickly, faster than facts. It's one of the oldest truths of adolescence. You can measure a school's heartbeat by how fast a story crosses the cafeteria. And today, the story was Amara. Chadwick Miller leaned against a row of lockers, as if the hallway had been built to frame him. He slapped palms with Tyler and Mason, his laughter echoing down the corridor like a drumbeat telling everyone where the center of gravity was. When his eyes caught Amara's, he let his grin sharpen, but she turned calmly to spin her lock. Her stillness stung more than a glare would have. Layla Torres appeared at Amara's side with the quiet urgency of someone who doesn't want to be noticed. She carried too many books, always did. "Hey," she said, voice small but steady. "Math first, right? I can walk you." Amara nodded. "Thanks." In class, the teacher droned about algebraic equations, sums, differences, the symmetry of numbers. Amara copied them neatly, translating the symbols into words in her mind so they would never sound mechanical if spoken aloud. 2 + 2 = 4. The square root of 9 = 3. No hard edges, no strange codes, just clean sentences, like lines of a poem that couldn't hurt anyone. Around her, whispers floated like paper airplanes. Chad's pen scratched not against paper, but against reputation, muttering jokes under his breath, half laughs at the back of the room. Every glance toward Amara carried the same question. Would she break her silence? She did not. By the time lunch arrived, the cafeteria was humming. Metal trays clattered, soda cans hissed open, and the noise of hundreds of conversations stacked into one restless hum. Amara stood at the threshold, tray balanced in both hands. She could feel the theater of the room. Where you sat at lunch was not just a choice, it was a declaration. Chad's table was the loudest. Athletes, cheerleaders, those who borrowed confidence by orbiting him. He spotted Amara and made a small performance of shifting in his chair, leaving space as though mocking the idea she'd dare sit there. The laughter that followed was as predictable as the ringing of the bell. Layla waved from near the windows. "Here," she mouthed, raising her hand. Amara walked toward her, every step a test. She sat down, calm as ever, and unwrapped her sandwich with fingers that didn't tremble. "You okay?" Layla asked. Amara nodded. "I've had louder rooms." That answer made Layla laugh, softly, like she had just been let in on a secret. From across the room, Chad watched. He began another story, arms wide, making his friends laugh on cue. He was the conductor, and they were the orchestra. But no matter how high the laughter rose, Amara didn't look over. She bit into her sandwich, drank her water, and smiled once at something Layla said about her math teacher's obsession with fractions. Silence can be louder than noise. Chad didn't realize it yet, but the audience did. A few students shifted uncomfortably at his mimicry, his exaggerated retelling of the hallway bump. The joke rang hollow without its target reacting. Amara's tray was almost empty when a group of freshmen passed behind her, whispering. She caught fragments. That's her. She didn't even flinch. Maybe she's just different. The words weren't cruel this time, just curious, even edged with respect. Layla leaned closer. People are watching him more than you. They just don't know it yet. Amara folded her napkin, placed it on her tray, and looked out the cafeteria windows where the sun painted pale squares across the floor. Crowds always watch the noise first, she said, but quiet changes things too. It wasn't defiance in her tone. It wasn't even hope. It was simply knowledge, spoken with the calmness of someone who had lived through storms larger than a cafeteria laugh. The lunch bell ended the moment. Students streamed back into hallways, voices trailing like echoes. Chad rose last, stretching his shoulders as though he'd carried the entire performance. His eyes tracked Amara until she was gone. Tyler muttered, "She didn't even blink." Mason added, "Kinda creepy, man." Chad's grin faltered just enough for them to see. That was the beginning of the crack. Amara's second day at Northview ended with her walking again to the curb, Layla beside her. No grand exits, no speeches, just steady footsteps against pavement. Behind her, the building buzzed with stories, most of them bent toward Chad. Yet for the first time, some of those whispers carried a different question. Not who will he target next, but why didn't she bow? At the crosswalk, Amara adjusted the strap of her bag and exhaled. School was its own arena, but she knew something Bryce could not. Every stage has an audience, and every audience eventually tires of the same act. The sun slipped lower, scattering gold across the asphalt, a quiet end to a loud day. The bus sighed to a stop at the corner of Willow Street, releasing its passengers into the late afternoon air. Amara Johnson stepped down carefully, holding her bag close. The day's weight clung to her, not heavy enough to break her stride, but noticeable, like dust on a dark coat. She walked the short path toward a modest two-story house with ivy climbing the porch rail. It was the kind of home that didn't brag, but welcomed. The front door opened before she reached it. Vin Diesel stood framed by the warm glow of the hallway light. Not the red carpet Vin, not the poster on a theater wall, but the man in a plain black t-shirt, sleeves rolled up, smile easy. "You're late," he said, mock sternness in his voice. "The bus was slow," Amara replied. "That bus is always slow," he said, stepping back to let her in. "Dinner's almost ready." Inside, the air smelled of garlic and onions softening in olive oil. The kitchen hummed with domestic sounds, pots clinking, a kettle beginning to whisper steam. Vin stirred something on the stove with the same focus he gave to a film set. He glanced sideways. "First real day?" Amara set her bag down. "Second. First day doesn't count. Everyone's still figuring out your name." "And by the second day?" he asked. "They've already decided what you are." Vin raised an eyebrow. "And what are you?" Amara shrugged. "Quiet, different, target." The words sat between them. He didn't rush to fill the silence. Instead, he reached into the cabinet, pulled down 2 bowls, and set them on the counter with a soft thud. "You know," he said finally, "people used to say the same about me. Too quiet, too intense, didn't belong." She looked at him. "You turned out fine. Because I learned something." He turned down the flame, leaned against the counter. "Noise burns fast. Quiet lasts. When you don't feed the fire, Bullies run out of fuel. Amara thought about Chad's grin, the cafeteria stage, the laughter that crumbled when no one clapped back. "He wants me to play along," she murmured. "Then don't audition," Vin said. "You don't have to fight every battle. Sometimes truth fights for you." They carried bowls to the table. Pasta with roasted vegetables, nothing fancy, but comforting in its colors and smells. Amara twirled noodles slowly. Vin poured water into glasses. They ate in a rhythm that felt like safety itself. Halfway through, Vin leaned back, watching her. "Did you make any friends?" "One." He nodded. "That's enough. Real friends are like oxygen. You don't need gallons, just enough to breathe." Amara smiled faintly. "Her name's Layla. She talks a lot." "Balance for your silence," Vin said. "Good. Keep her close." The kettle whistled louder now. Vin rose to make tea, setting 2 mugs on the table. The house was quiet except for the sound of spoons stirring. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, and the day's noise dissolved into evening calm. Amara's eyes dropped to her notebook lying beside her bag. On the cover, she had copied a line from a book she loved. "The quiet can be thunder if you carry it long enough." She tapped the words with her finger. Vin noticed. "You already know what to do," he said gently. She sipped her tea. "Sometimes I wonder if silence looks like weakness." He shook his head. "No. Weakness is letting someone else write your story. Silence is strength when you choose it. But silence doesn't mean doing nothing. It means waiting until the right sound matters." Amara looked down at the steam curling from her mug. Patience wasn't easy, but she trusted him, the man who had chosen her not as an obligation, but as a daughter. His presence was proof that family is not always made by blood, but by loyalty, by love that refuses to walk away. Dinner ended with dishes clinking into the sink. Vin washed, Amara dried. They didn't need many words. The rhythm of shared chores carried its own comfort. Before bed, Amara stood at her window, looking at the street where the bus would come again tomorrow. She thought of Chad, of Tyler and Mason laughing like echoes, of the cafeteria whispers. She thought of Layla's hand raised in invitation, and she thought of her father's words. "Noise burns fast, quiet lasts." The moonlight cut across her desk, lighting the open page of her notebook. She wrote one sentence before turning out the light. "Tomorrow, I will not audition." Then she slipped into bed, pulled the blanket to her chin, and let the house's quiet carry her into sleep. The next morning dawned with the faint hum of sprinklers on neighborhood lawns, a chorus of sparrows weaving through the quiet. Amara Johnson shouldered her bag and stepped into the day as though it were any other. Yet the whispers from yesterday clung to her memory like chalk dust on fingertips. The school bus wheezed up to the corner. Inside, students laughed, traded headphones, scrolled through glowing screens. Amara took her seat near the window. She gazed outward, letting the scenery slide past. Houses, corner stores, a mural half faded with sun. She thought of the sentence she'd written in her notebook before sleep. "Tomorrow, I will not audition." It became her anchor. At Northview, the morning air buzzed even louder. A rumor storm had already begun to swirl. She doesn't react. That's creepy. Maybe she's just shy. No, I heard she's hiding something big. Chadwick Miller heard every version and fueled them with his grin. Standing at the top of the steps, he spread his arms wide as though greeting an audience. His voice carried across the courtyard. "Good morning, Northview. Let's welcome our special guest again, Miss Silent Thunder." Tyler and Mason laughed, clapping like a track team starting pistol. Students chuckled, some out of loyalty, others because silence felt dangerous. Amara didn't look up. She walked past, steady as a pendulum. It bothered Chad more than he could say. A bully needs the echo of fear, the tremor in the crowd. Without it, the performance feels flat. Classes unspooled in their usual order. Notes scribbled, quizzes handed out, voices rising and falling. For Amara, each room was another test in patience. For Chad, each room was another chance to prod, poke, nudge her into reaction. A pen tossed onto her desk. A chair shoved slightly askew. A mocking cough behind her answer. But she didn't break. She translated the annoyance into equations the way she translated math symbols into words. A fraction became one part of something larger. An equation became both sides must be balanced. She wrote quietly, each symbol softened into a sentence in her head. By dismissal, the sun had begun to lean westward. Students poured out in a tide of voices, backpacks slung low. The parking lot roared with engines and laughter. Chad leaned against a lamppost, watching. He had prepared another small humiliation, perhaps a tripped step, perhaps a mocking cheer. Then the curbside door of a sleek black car swung open. The engine's growl was unmistakable, low, powerful, like a beast idling patiently. Heads turned, phones lifted. It was a Dodge Charger, polished to mirror shine. Amara walked toward it with the same calm stride she carried through hallways. She didn't hurry, didn't wave, didn't announce. She simply arrived at the passenger door, and that was when the driver stepped out. Broad shoulders, shaved head catching the sunlight, voice warm even in a single word. "Hey, kiddo." The courtyard froze. Vin Diesel was standing on Northview pavement, smiling at Amara as though the rest of the world didn't exist. Tyler whispered, "No way." Mason gawked. Students gasped, some already tapping their screens to capture the moment. Vin opened the door fully, gesturing. "Hop in. How was the day?" Amara slid into the seat without fanfare, her bag resting beside her. She answered simply, "Quiet." Chad's smirk faltered. The performance he had planned, another round of mocking laughter, collapsed like a stage curtain cut loose from its rigging. Around him, the crowd shifted. Their loyalty was fickle, and loyalty to fear is always fragile. One student muttered, "She's with him." Another added, "That's her dad." Vin closed the door gently, walked around to the driver's side, and slid in. The Charger's engine purred, deep and certain. The car pulled away, leaving the smell of gasoline and the silence of awe. For a moment, the courtyard had no sound at all. Then the hum of chatter began again, fast and sharp, like bees released from a hive. "She's his daughter? She didn't say anything? Chad's not gonna live this down." Chad clenched his jaw, forcing a grin back onto his face, but the edges cracked. He tried to laugh, raising his voice. "So what? Just because she knows some actor..." But the sentence trailed off. No one was listening. Inside the Charger, Amara rested her head against the window, watching the school fade into distance. Vin glanced over, one hand at the wheel. "You were quiet back there," he said. "I usually am," she replied. He smiled. "And yet, somehow, you said more than he ever could." Amara let the hum of the engine steady her thoughts. Silence had spoken. Not through her alone, but through presence. Through family that refused to let her stand alone. The road stretched ahead, golden with late sunlight. Tomorrow would bring another test. She knew that. But for this moment, she breathed easily, held by the knowledge that dignity didn't need a stage. It only needed truth, and truth had just stepped out of a car. The charger had only been gone from the school lot for a few minutes before the noise returned. Northview students carried stories the way sparks carry fire. By the time Amara's classmates reached their homes, the airwaves of group chats and social media feeds were already crowded with one question. Did you see who picked her up? Screens filled with shaky videos. Amara slipping into the passenger seat. Vin Diesel's unmistakable figure at the curb. Captions sprouted, "She's his daughter? No way this is real." Chad's face, though. By evening, even students who hadn't been anywhere near the lot were replaying the clip, adding music, turning it into memes. The silence that had once been her mystery was now rebranded as strength. And strength in high school is contagious. At dinner, Amara ate in quiet rhythm again, twirling pasta as Vin ladled sauce onto his plate. He had seen the phones lifted, the way kids stared. He knew this would change something. "You okay?" he asked, breaking a slice of bread. "They won't stop talking about it," she said simply. "You didn't ask them to," Vin replied. "They'll talk today, tomorrow, then something else. But you just keep walking." She nodded, but she could feel it, the shift in the air, the way her silence had turned into a riddle none of them could solve. The next morning, as she stepped into school, the change was unmistakable. Conversations hushed when she passed. Not cruel silence this time, curious, even careful. Layla hurried up, flushed with excitement. "Do you know what people are saying? They think you're, well, you are. But I mean they're calling you." She dropped her voice. "Hollywood royalty." Amara frowned. "I'm just me." "I know. But now they can't stop wondering. And Chad..." Layla's eyes darted toward the far end of the hall. Chad stood there, his hands gripping his backpack straps. He looked as if he had slept poorly, eyes red with frustration. Tyler whispered something in his ear. Mason laughed, but Chad didn't join in. His grin was stiff, brittle. "Watch him," Layla murmured. "He's not used to being ignored." All through the morning, Chad tried to reclaim his stage. He raised his voice more than usual, cracked louder jokes, gestured wide. Some students still laughed, but others glanced toward Amara as if comparing performances. For the first time, Chad's noise wasn't enough to drown the quiet. At lunch, the cafeteria was buzzing louder than usual. Amara sat with Layla by the windows again, the sunlight making their table look like an island apart. A boy from the sophomore class stopped by just long enough to say, "Hey, cool car yesterday." He said it respectfully, almost shy, then moved on. Layla's eyes widened. That never happens here. No one ever just says something nice without strings. Amara chewed slowly. It'll pass. But she wasn't sure. Because across the room, Chad was watching. His face was tight, jaw flexing every time another student whispered while glancing at Amara. Tyler leaned over. "Don't worry, man, you're still king." But kingship built on laughter is fragile. The throne creaks when the audience finds a new story. By last period, the tension thickened. Chad deliberately dropped a stack of Amara's books in the hallway, muttering, "Careful, princess." Phones rose again, but the laughter was thinner now, hesitant. Amara knelt, gathered her things, and stood without a word. The silence hit harder than any retort. It made Chad's cruelty look small, like a trick performed too many times. That night, Layla messaged Amara, "He's mad, really mad. Be careful tomorrow." Amara typed back slowly, "I'll be fine." Then she closed her phone and returned to her notebook, where she wrote, "Silence unsettles noise. Noise hates silence. Meanwhile, Chad paced his room, fists clenching at the sight of his reflection in the mirror. His reputation was slipping, and nothing terrified him more than irrelevance. In high school, once the crowd senses weakness, the fall is quick. He tossed his phone onto the bed, then picked it up again, scrolling through memes of Vin Diesel in the school lot. One caption stung most. Chad thought he was the main character. Turns out he's just a side plot. His cheeks burned. "I'll show them," he muttered. "I'll show her." He texted Tyler and Mason, "Tomorrow we go bigger." The stage was set. Amara didn't need to rehearse. She had no lines to memorize. Her role was already chosen, to walk in silence, to let truth fight at its own pace. She didn't know yet how far Chad would push, or what would break first, his voice or his throne. But she knew something fundamental. Storms always burn themselves out, and this storm was about to get louder before it fell silent. The third morning at Northview began with the same swirl of voices in the hall, but the undercurrent had changed. Curiosity sharpened into scrutiny. Everyone wanted to know how the story would move forward. Amara Johnson moved through it all like water slipping past rocks. She didn't rush, didn't dawdle. She greeted no one and ignored no one. Just a steady rhythm of steps toward her locker. From the corner, Chadwick Miller watched. His jaw tightened as he noted the way students' eyes flicked toward Amara and away from him. He had been the show yesterday, but now he was in danger of becoming the sideshow. That was unthinkable. By lunch, his frustration boiled into a plan. The cafeteria was packed. The noise, a constant swell of trays and laughter. Chad saw Amara carrying her lunch, simple sandwich, apple, bottle of water, across the crowded floor. She walked toward her usual table near the windows, where Layla had already saved her a seat. Chad's grin widened. Timing was everything. As Amara passed, he stepped sideways, swinging his foot just slightly. Her shoe caught. The tray lurched forward. Milk spilled across the floor, splashing up in white arcs. Her sandwich slid, her apple rolled under a nearby table. The cafeteria erupted. Laughter rose high, like a wave crashing against rocks. Chad threw his hands up, feigning innocence. "My bad," he shouted, grinning at the crowd. "Didn't see you there." Students clapped, jeered, some recording with phones. The ritual of humiliation was supposed to be complete. But Amara only bent down, gathered what she could from the tray, and stood up again. Her face was calm, her eyes steady. She didn't curse, didn't cry, didn't even glare. She walked to the nearest trash can, dropped the ruined food inside, and retrieved her bottle of water. Then she returned to her seat beside Layla without a word. The laughter began to falter. Without reaction, the joke sagged. What was supposed to be a performance with a victim became a hollow skit. Layla leaned closer. "Are you okay?" Amara nodded once. "It's just milk." She unscrewed the bottle, took a sip, and set it down with quiet dignity. The sunlight through the window caught her profile. She looked unbothered, untouchable. Across the room, Chad tried to restart the joke. He mimed slipping on a banana peel, waved his arms exaggeratedly. Tyler laughed too loudly. Mason slapped the table, but their performance fell flat. Other students weren't laughing. Some frowned. Some looked away. One girl muttered under her breath, "That was low." Another said, "It's not even funny anymore." Phones captured everything. The accidental trip, Amara's steady recovery, the thinning laughter. By the time the clips spread online that night, captions had shifted from "LOL savage" to "Why does she never fight back?" and even "Respect." She didn't even blink. After the bell, Amara and Layla walked out together. "You didn't even get mad," Layla said. "Getting mad would have given him what he wanted," Amara answered. "But doesn't it hurt?" Amara thought for a moment. "It's like when someone yells into a canyon. If the canyon echoes back, the voice grows. If the canyon stays silent, the yell dies." Layla let that sink in. "You're the canyon." Amara smiled faintly. Something like that. Meanwhile, Chad stormed into the boys' locker room, furious. Tyler followed, Mason close behind. "What's wrong, man? You nailed it," Tyler said. "No, I didn't," Chad snapped. "She didn't even flinch. Everyone's looking at me like I'm the idiot." "She's just weird," Mason muttered. "Give it time." Chad slammed a locker door shut. "Time is what I don't have. I'm not letting her take this from me." He paced, fists clenched, mind racing for the next move. The throne he'd built on laughter was wobbling, and he knew it. That evening at home, Amara sat at her desk, writing in her notebook under the glow of her lamp. She wrote the sentence slowly. It was just milk. He wanted thunder. I gave him rain. The words steadied her, like anchoring stones. Downstairs, Vin called, "Movie night if you're done with homework." She closed the notebook and smiled. Tomorrow would bring another storm. But tonight she had warmth, family, and the steady quiet that bullies could never reach. The cafeteria clash had not gone the way Chad planned. Instead of cementing his power, it had chipped it. Students saw the contrast clearly now. His noise against her stillness. His cruelty against her composure. And once a crowd begins to doubt, fear loses its shine. The next act of the drama was already writing itself. The next morning carried a different kind of tension. The school corridors usually opened with the same rhythm, slamming lockers, the rustle of paper, sneakers squeaking against tile. But today there was a subtle undercurrent. Something waited in the air, like the hush before rain. Amara Johnson walked her steady pace, shoulders relaxed, bag balanced on one strap. She had learned, in just days, that her silence was its own language. But silence, in a place where noise rules, also provokes. When she reached her locker, a knot of students had already gathered nearby. They weren't facing her directly. They hovered at an angle, eyes wide, half smiling, half cringing. She turned the corner and saw why. Her locker door was covered in jagged letters. Words sprayed in red paint across the pale metal. Ugly words, meant to wound. A crude drawing slashed beneath them. Taped notes fluttered along the edges. Scrawled insults in black marker. The stench of paint still hung sharp in the air. The laughter this time wasn't loud. It was quieter, sharper, like knives kept close to the chest. Phones rose again, recording. Chadwick Miller leaned against the opposite wall, arms folded, expression calm in its cruelty. Tyler and Mason snickered beside him, but Chad didn't laugh. He only watched Amara, waiting for her face to break. Layla Torres appeared at Amara's side, her gasp slipping out before she could stop it. "Oh no, Amara." Her eyes darted to Chad, then back. "This is too far." Amara stood still. She looked at the words, the paint dripping down, the notes curling at the corners. She didn't touch them yet. She simply breathed once, deep and slow. Then she pulled a tissue from her bag, wiped her hand clean of dust, and pressed her fingers against the locker's edge, pushing the door open. The hinges groaned, and her books looked out at her, untouched inside. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "It still opens." Some students blinked. One boy in the crowd muttered, "She's not even mad?" Another whispered, She should report it. Amara gathered her books calmly. She closed the door again, leaving the red words exposed for everyone to see. She didn't try to scrub them away. She didn't cover them. She let them stand, bright against the pale metal, as if to say, "This ugliness belongs to him, not to me." Within minutes, the news reached the main office. Principal Harris arrived, tall, formal in his suit, a clipboard in hand. He frowned at the scene. Everyone stepped back, phones away. His tone was practiced, stern, but not fierce enough to pierce the tension. He turned to Amara. "Did you see who did this?" "No," Amara said evenly. Layla stepped forward. "It was him," she said, pointing directly at Chad. Her hands shook, but her voice held steady. "Everyone knows it." The crowd buzzed. Harris raised a hand. "Enough. We'll investigate. Miss Johnson, come with me. Mr. Miller, stay put." Chad smirked. "Sure, Principal." His grin widened when Harris turned away, but it faltered when he saw the cameras still pointed at him. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. They were studying him as though he were the one painted on the locker. In the office, Principal Harris spoke carefully, the way administrators often do when balancing truth against reputation. "Vandalism is a serious offense," he said, steepling his fingers. "We'll have maintenance clean your locker by the end of the day. We'll review the security cameras." Amara's gaze was steady. "The paint isn't the problem." Harris frowned. "What do you mean?" "It's what people believe when they see it. That matters more than the paint." Harris shifted uncomfortably. "Rumors fade. Focus on your studies. We'll handle discipline if necessary." Layla spoke up, her voice trembling with anger. "If necessary, everyone saw him. Everyone knows it was Chad." Harris gave her a measured look. "Accusations without proof don't serve anyone. We'll follow protocol." Layla pressed her lips tight, furious at the neutrality. Amara placed a hand gently on her friend's arm. "It's fine," she said. "They can paint words, but words don't close the door." Her calm unsettled even Harris, who expected outrage. He shuffled his papers, dismissed them, and promised a resolution. Back in the hallway, Amara returned to her locker. The words were still there, bright red, daring her. She didn't flinch. She placed her books back inside, closed the door again, and walked toward class. Students stepped aside for her without meaning to. Some looked away, ashamed. Some looked at her with awe. The graffiti shouted, but her silence shouted louder. Across the hall, Chad's eyes followed her. For the first time, his grin didn't fit his face. Tyler whispered something to him, but Chad didn't answer. He was calculating, already planning the next stage. If she wouldn't break with milk or paint, he would have to dig deeper. That evening, Amara sat with Vin at the kitchen table. He had heard about the vandalism through the school's call, his voice tight as he asked, "Do you want me to step in?" Amara shook her head. "Not yet." "You shouldn't have to stand through this," Vin said. "I know," Amara replied, "but standing is the point." Vin leaned back, studying her with eyes that had seen scripts, sets, cameras, but nothing as fierce as his daughter's quiet. "You sound like you've already written the ending." Amara closed her notebook, where she had written one line. They painted words on steel, but steel doesn't bend. The vandalism was supposed to shame her, to mark her. Instead, it marked Chad, and the crowd saw it. Fear was still in the air, but alongside it now bloomed something new. Doubt. Doubt in Chad's throne, doubt in his performance. And once doubt begins, fear's kingdom crumbles. Tomorrow, Chad would try again. And tomorrow, Amara would not audition. The next morning, Northview's halls seemed charged, as if the red paint still hung in the air even after the janitor's careful scrubbing. The locker, doctor gleamed metallic and clean, but the memory of the words clung to every corner. Students carried it in whispers. She didn't even cry. She opened it like nothing happened. Chadwick Miller arrived late, swagger dialed higher than usual. He wore his Letterman jacket though the weather was warm, his chin lifted as if daring the school to doubt his authority. Tyler and Mason flanked him like stagehands to a performer. "Time for a show," Chad muttered. The teacher asked for volunteers to read essays aloud. Chad's hand shot up, not because he wanted to share his work, but because the stage was open. He strolled to the front, flipping his paper casually. "Mine's about school traditions." He smirked, eyes cutting toward Amara. "Every year, new kids arrive. They need guidance. Some don't know how to fit in. Some think they're too good for us. My essay says," he coughed, fake dramatic, "that people should learn their place before they act like they're better than everyone else." The class tittered uneasily. A few chuckled out of habit, but the sound was thin. Amara didn't look up from her notebook. She copied the teacher's notes carefully. Theme, metaphor, character voice. Her hand was steady, her breathing calm. The teacher frowned. "Mr. Miller, this isn't appropriate. Sit down." Chad bowed as if on stage, grinning wide. Just speaking truth. But the truth in the room was that the laughter was hollow. Even Tyler's chuckle faded too quickly. Group experiment, balancing simple chemical reactions written on the board. Chad paired himself near Amara, leaning across her desk. "You know what happens when something doesn't balance?" He whispered loudly, making sure others could hear. "It explodes." He chuckled at his own line. Amara wrote the equation out slowly, translating the symbols into words so they couldn't trip her. 2 molecules of hydrogen plus 1 molecule of oxygen equals water. She spoke the sentence softly, almost like a poem. The group stared at her, surprised by the calm clarity of her tone. Chad tried to snicker again, but no one joined him. One girl whispered, "That actually makes sense when she says it like that." Another nodded. Chad's joke dissolved. He scowled. The cafeteria always served as his throne room. Today, Chad climbed onto a bench, clapped his hands, and announced loudly, "Attention, everyone! Let's give a round of applause to our guest of honor, Miss Hollywood Mystery herself." Phones swiveled. A few clapped weakly, but the sound never rose high. Instead, it broke off in scattered echoes. Amara, carrying her tray, didn't even pause. She walked to her seat by the window where Layla waited. She unwrapped her sandwich with quiet precision. Chad spread his arms. "Come on, people, don't tell me you're buying this act. She's just sitting there, pretending she's untouchable. You think a car and a famous dad make her better than us?" Mason laughed too loudly, trying to fill the void. Tyler hooted, but the sound bounced awkwardly against silence. Layla leaned across the table toward Amara. "You don't have to take this. You could tell him off. People would cheer." Amara bit into her sandwich. When she swallowed, she said simply, "Crowds cheer for a moment. Silence lasts longer." The words weren't shouted, but they reached further than Chad's noise. A few students near her table nodded unconsciously. Chad jumped down, frustrated. He walked past her table, muttering loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thunder with no lightning, just clouds." Amara raised her eyes for the first time. She met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Clouds make rain," she said softly. Rain wears down stone. The cafeteria fell still. It wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel, but her line landed heavier than his whole performance. Chad looked around, expecting laughter, but none came. Instead, some students looked away, embarrassed for him. Others stared at Amara with new respect. The throne wobbled again. In the locker room, Chad threw his bag down hard. She's playing with me, making me look stupid. Tyler shrugged. She barely talks. That's the point, Chad snapped. She doesn't talk and still people listen. Mason said quietly, maybe just leave her alone? Chad turned on him, eyes blazing. Leave her alone? Then I lose, you don't get it. If she wins by silence, then what am I? Neither boy answered. The truth was clear. Chad was loud, but his words were shrinking. His jokes were tiring. His audience was drifting. And in a place where power is borrowed from laughter, silence was stealing his crown. That evening, Amara wrote in her notebook, "Noise is heavy but hollow. Silence is light, but it lingers." She closed the cover gently. Downstairs, Vin called, "Dinner's ready." She smiled. Tomorrow would bring more noise, but she already understood. Noise only survives if the crowd feeds it, and crowds, sooner or later, get hungry for something else. The afternoon bus let Amara off beneath a sky the color of warm linen. The day's noise thinned as she walked the familiar block, past a mailbox with chipped paint and a sycamore that shed pale bark like old paper. By the time she reached the house, the quiet had gathered around her shoulders like a shawl. The front door opened before she knocked. Vin stood there with a wooden spoon in one hand and a smile he didn't force. "You smell like cafeteria mystery," he said. "Milk," Amara answered, stepping inside. "And a crowd that wanted thunder." Vin held the door a second longer, as if closing it would lock the world out for the evening. In the kitchen, onions softened in a pan. The room felt like a small harbor, bright, warm, steady. He set the spoon down and leaned his hip against the counter. "Tell me," he said. She did, but simply. The trip, the laughter, the paint on the locker, the way the principal promised the usual steps. She left out the names and the rumors, the details that turned pain into spectacle. When she finished, the pan hissed and quiet fell again. Vin nodded once, as if he'd just watched the first act of a film and knew the shape of the second. "And you?" he asked. "Are you tired of being quiet?" Amara pulled herself onto a stool. "Sometimes I want to answer loud, just once, to pick up a microphone and make the room hear me." "You could," he said. "You'd be good at it." She studied his face. "So why stay silent?" He took a breath like a man choosing the right lane before a bend in the road. "When I was your age, I wanted every answer right away. I thought patience meant surrender." He lifted the pan and turned the onions, letting them slip like coins of gold. But patience isn't surrender. It's strength. It's choosing not to give your enemy the script he wrote for you. He looked up. Bullies rehearse. They need your reaction to hit their mark. Amara traced a fingertip along the counter's edge. "So I let him perform into an empty room." "Exactly," Vin said. "You're not silent because you're small. You're silent because you're big enough not to be moved." He smiled, then softened his voice. "And you're not alone. Don't forget that part." She thought of the curb, the Charger's door opening, the shock that rippled through the crowd. She hadn't asked for a stage, but the moment had taken one for her. It felt strange, the way a single door opening could rewrite a hallway's script. What if being quiet just looks like losing? She asked. Vin shook his head. Losing is letting him decide who you are. Quiet is knowing who you are without his permission. He slid a pot onto another burner, added tomatoes, basil, a pinch of patience that smelled like summer. There's something else, he said. The truth has a way of arriving, slowly sometimes, but when it enters the room, power built on fear collapses. It's like a set made of cardboard. Looks real until rain touches it. Amara smiled at the image. Rain wears down stone, she murmured. Exactly, he said, and fear hates the weather. They cooked together without hurry. He passed her the salt. She passed him a tasting spoon. They moved around each other with the ease that comes from many evenings shared. When they ate, it was at the small table by the window, where dusk folded itself along the sill. Vin asked about the one friend, the girl with too many books. Layla, Amara said. She's loyal in a way that doesn't need witnesses. Good, Vin said. Everyone needs at least one person like that. One is enough. He held up a single finger, then set it down with a grin. Enough can be stronger than plenty. They ate in quiet for a while. Forks on plates. Water poured into glasses. Somewhere a neighbor's dog barked exactly 3 times, then remembered the evening was kind. When they finished, Vin stacked the dishes and let the tap run. You know, he said over the water, this is not only about you. Crowds learn from these moments. Most kids won't say it out loud, but a lot of them know how it feels to be the one who gets pushed. Too many, roughly 1 in 5, carry a story like that. Amara dried a plate slowly. The number wasn't news to her heart, but hearing it wrapped in words made it feel like a candle held up in a dark room. Small, warm, true. Then maybe they're waiting, she said, watching to see if silence can work. It already is, Vin said, flicking soapy water from his fingers. I saw the video of you standing in milk. You looked like a lighthouse. Amara rolled her eyes, smiling despite herself. Dramatic. Guilty, he said, holding up both hands. But right. They finished the dishes. The kitchen reassembled itself into neat lines and soft reflections. In the living room, a stack of old DVDs leaned against the television like a small city. Vin picked one at random, then set it down again. Not tonight, he said. You need sleep more than a plot twist. Amara crossed to the window and pulled the curtain aside with 2 fingers. The street was a simple stripe of black, the kind that holds more peace than traffic. She thought of tomorrow with the kind of clarity that doesn't promise comfort, only direction. Why does he keep pushing? She asked, not turning. He had everything, the laughter, the friends. Because none of it was his, Vin said gently. He borrowed it from fear, and fear has a short lease. Amara let the curtain fall. He's going to try again. Probably, Vin agreed. Bullies double down when the old tricks stop working. They get sloppy. That's when truth walks in. And if you've kept your hands clean, truth lands on your side. She nodded, a decision settling in her shoulders. Then I'll keep my hands clean. Vin stepped forward, placed a palm against the top of her head, the way he did when she was smaller, a gesture that meant blessing more than approval. That's my girl, he said. Upstairs, Amara sat at her desk and opened her notebook. On a new page, she wrote, Patience is not surrender. Silence is not absence. Truth is a key that doesn't rush the lock. She pressed the pen down after the last word, as if sealing something inside it. Before bed, she sent a message to Layla. Thank you for the seat by the window. The reply came back fast. Always. Then, a second message. Hesitant. If you ever need help, I'm in. Amara typed only one word, soon, and set the phone face down. In the mirror, her face looked like itself. Calm mouth, steady eyes, a girl who belonged to herself before she belonged to any hallway story. She turned out the light and lay down. The house breathed around her. Somewhere beyond the sycamore, the world kept its noise, but it felt far away. Downstairs, Vin rinsed the last glass and placed it on the rack. He looked toward the staircase and, just for a moment, let the pride show. Not the pride of fame, the pride of a father watching his daughter choose dignity when no one would fault her for anger. He turned off the kitchen light. The room went soft, like a set after the camera cuts. Tomorrow would bring new scenes. Tonight, the story could rest. By Thursday, the storm around Amara had changed color. The cafeteria clash and the vandalized locker still lived in every whisper. But there was also a new hesitation in the way people spoke Chadwick Miller's name. His throne was trembling, and the audience knew it. Amara moved through the halls with the same pace as always, measured, calm, untouchable. Yet inside, she carried her father's words like a compass. Patience isn't surrender. Silence is strength. Truth arrives in its own time. She repeated them like a quiet drumbeat, one that kept her steps steady when the crowd tried to sway her. That morning, Layla Torres found her near the library. Layla's arms were stacked high with books, but her eyes glittered with something other than academic duty. "I need to show you something," she whispered, tugging Amara toward the empty corner table. Amara sat, waiting. Layla pulled out her phone, glanced around to make sure no one was watching, and opened a folder of screenshots. The images glowed harsh in the dim light. "These are from Chad's group chat," Layla said. "My cousin's in it by mistake. He added him months ago. She sent me these after she saw what was happening to you." Amara leaned closer. The screenshots told their own story. Messages where Chad boasted about making kids trip in the hall. Comments about girls, cruel in their sexism. Jokes built on racist slurs, designed to belittle. And not just about her. Others, weaker kids. Anyone who wouldn't or couldn't fight back. Layla's voice trembled with anger. "He thinks this stuff is funny. He thinks no one will ever see it. But I saved them. Every single one." Amara studied the words on the screen. They were ugly, but they weren't new to her. Cruelty often walked in daylight long before it was caught in print. Still, there was something undeniable about seeing the phrases fixed in pixels. Not rumors, not whispers, evidence. "You should send these to Principal Harris," Layla urged. "Not yet," Amara said quietly. "Not yet," Layla frowned. "Why wait? This proves everything." Amara's eyes stayed calm, but there was weight in her tone. "If we give it now, Harris will call Chad in, lecture him, maybe suspend him for a week. Then it ends, but nothing really changes. He'll laugh it off as some official slap on the wrist. The crowd won't see it, and if the crowd doesn't see it, they'll keep following him." Layla blinked. "So what do we do?" "We wait," Amara said. "We let him dig deeper. The more he pushes, the less the crowd laughs. When he's at his loudest, that's when we show them." Layla hesitated. "That sounds dangerous." Amara tapped the phone screen gently, as if sealing the words inside it. "Truth needs timing. My dad says fear has a short lease. Let him spend what's left of it. Then the rent comes due." The rest of the day unfolded like a slow performance. Chad tried again to control the room. In history class, he made jokes under his breath when Amara answered questions. In gym, he shouted comments about her celebrity chauffeur. The old laughter didn't rise to meet him. Students glanced at him, then looked away. Some even glanced toward Amara instead, as if gauging her reaction, but she offered nothing. No glare, no comeback, just her steady silence, the canyon refusing to echo. Each non-reaction pushed Chad closer to desperation. By the time the final bell rang, Tyler and Mason were following him less like bodyguards and more like confused shadows. That evening, Amara and Layla met in the library again. The place was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Layla spread out a stack of notes and her phone. "I saved everything in 3 places," she said. "Phone, email, flash drive, just in case." Amara nodded. "Good." Layla leaned closer, voice dropping. "So, when do we use them?" Amara closed her notebook and looked her friend in the eye. "Soon, but not as revenge. Revenge is loud, and it fades. This has to be truth. Truth needs the right stage." Layla exhaled. "You're braver than me." Amara shook her head. "No, I'm just not giving him the ending he wrote for me." At home, Vin noticed her thoughtful silence over dinner. He didn't press, but after the dishes were cleared, he asked, "Thinking about the storm?" Amara nodded. "I think I know when to let the truth in." Vin smiled, slow and approving. "Good. Remember, evidence is like light. Too soon, it blinds. Too late, it fades. Right on time, it reveals." She tucked the sentence into her memory, another compass point to hold steady. That night in her room, Amara copied one line into her notebook. "Noise burns itself out. Truth waits, patient as stone." Her phone buzzed with another message from Layla. "Everything's safe. Ready when you are." Amara replied with 2 words. "Not yet." Then she placed the phone face down and let the stillness of her room carry her into rest. Outside, the sycamore tree stood unmoving, its roots deep, its branches waiting. Tomorrow would come, and Chad would try again. That was certain, but the ground was shifting under him, grain by grain, and he didn't see it yet. Friday morning at Northview felt heavier than the rest of the week. Students shuffled in with backpacks and yawns, but there was an edge in the air, a sense that something was building. Chadwick Miller walked down the hall like an actor determined not to lose his role, but his stride lacked the ease it once had. Every step seemed more forced, every laugh louder than it needed to be. Amara Johnson noticed, but didn't change her rhythm. She moved with the same calm, the same steady pace that had become her shield. She didn't raise her eyes when the whispers started, didn't flinch when Tyler tried to shoulder past her, and didn't turn when Mason snickered behind her. The canyon remained silent. The teacher asked for short presentations on civil movements. Chad raised his hand quickly, the smirk already tugging at his lips. He strode to the front and began. "So, history is all about people trying to look important. Some think they're leaders. Some think silence makes them strong. But really, silence just means you've got nothing to say." He looked straight at Amara. The class shifted uncomfortably. A few students chuckled, but the sound cracked in the air. One girl muttered under her breath, "That's not even the assignment." The teacher cleared his throat. "Mr. Miller, please stay on topic." Chad waved him off. "I am on topic. Every movement needs a voice, right? If you stay quiet, you're just background noise." He raised his hand in mock imitation of Amara's calm posture. "Like this, see? Totally inspiring." The silence in the room was louder than his words. Amara didn't lift her gaze from her notebook. She wrote carefully, "Noise doesn't mean truth. Truth doesn't need applause." When Chad finished, the teacher's eyes narrowed. "Sit down. You're wasting our time." Chad's ears burned. He sat, trying to laugh it off, but the sound fell flat. The teacher posed a problem on the board. If 3 students share 12 pencils equally, how many does each get? She asked for volunteers. Amara raised her hand and answered clearly, "Each student gets 4 pencils." The teacher nodded. "Correct." Chad leaned back in his chair and shouted, "Wow, amazing! She can divide 12 by 3. A genius is among us." Some laughter followed, but it wasn't the hearty cheer he was used to. It was scattered, hesitant, quickly fading. A boy near the back muttered, "What's his problem?" Another whispered, "It's just math, dude." Amara didn't turn. She quietly wrote the equation again in words. 12 shared by 3 is 4. Then she underlined it once, as if to steady it. The teacher frowned at Chad. "Enough, Miller." He slouched back, muttering, "Just joking." But his hands were tight fists under the desk. Chad's desperation rose to its peak. He stood on a cafeteria bench again, clapping his hands for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted, "it's time for our daily dose of silent thunder. Today's special, the girl who thinks staring at walls makes her wise." Tyler and Mason laughed loudly, clapping like background music. But the rest of the cafeteria was different. Phones lifted, but not with the eagerness of fans, more like witnesses recording evidence. Amara continued her quiet walk to the window table. She set down her tray, sat beside Layla, and unfolded her sandwich. Her calm was more powerful than any shout. Layla leaned in. "He's trying too hard." Amara bit into her sandwich, chewed, swallowed. The more he pushes, the less they laugh. And it was true. The room's noise felt strained, the laughter brittle. A few students rolled their eyes. Some whispered, "He's obsessed." Chad's grin cracked. He hopped down from the bench, slamming his tray onto the table. His face flushed, his breathing quick. "What's wrong with you people? This is funny." But no one laughed. For the first time in years, Chad faced silence not as a weapon he used, but as a wall rising against him. And silence, he realized, was heavier than all the noise he could muster. In the locker room, Chad paced like a caged animal. Tyler leaned against the bench, Mason tying his shoelaces. "She's making me look like a clown," Chad spat. "She doesn't even do anything, and people are listening to her silence." Tyler shrugged. "Maybe just stop." Chad snapped his head around. "Stop? That's losing. I don't lose." Mason hesitated. "Feels like you already are, man." Chad slammed his locker shut, the metal ringing out like a bell of frustration. His eyes were red with rage, his jaw locked tight. "No, if they won't laugh at my jokes, then I'll give them something they can't ignore." Neither Tyler nor Mason answered. The silence in the room felt heavier than the slam of the locker. That evening, Amara wrote in her notebook again, "The crowd is pulling away. He doesn't see it yet, but soon he will. And when truth walks in, the show ends." She closed the book, turned off her lamp, and let the quiet steady her once more. Monday began not with laughter, but with something quieter. The hallways of Northview buzzed as always. Lockers slammed, shoes squeaked, conversations rushed in half sentences. But there was a shift, small as a pebble tipping balance in a scale. Amara Johnson walked her measured path, calm as ever. And for the first time, a few students moved aside without her asking. One boy even held the door open as she entered the math wing. He didn't say anything, only offered a nod. She returned it with the faintest smile. It was a small thing, but small things add up. The teacher handed out essays. Usually, Chadwick Miller would make some kind of joke at this moment. crumpling the paper dramatically, waving it around like a trophy or a punishment. Today, he still tried. Guess the teacher liked my spelling of the word awesome. A few chuckled, but it was polite, not joyful. Then, a girl behind Amara leaned forward and whispered, "If you need a pencil, I've got an extra." She slid it quietly onto Amara's desk. Amara already had her own pencil, but she accepted the gesture. "Thank you." It wasn't about the pencil. It was about recognition, about seeing her as part of the room. The teacher asked a difficult question about social change. Amara raised her hand and gave an answer in clear sentences, soft but steady. The teacher nodded with approval. Chad muttered, "Teacher's pet," under his breath. But the boy beside him didn't laugh. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and looked at Amara with respect instead. When class ended, a girl near the window said, "That was a good answer." Amara nodded once. That was all. But inside she noted it. Another small stone added to the pile. For days, the cafeteria had been Chad's stage. He entered expecting to reclaim it, expecting the thunder of laughter. He strutted past tables, tossing a grape toward Mason, bumping Tyler's shoulder like a signal. Then he saw it. At the window table where Amara and Layla usually sat alone, two more students had pulled up chairs. They weren't close friends, just kids who wanted somewhere else to sit, somewhere away from the noise. They smiled when Amara glanced at them. She didn't chase them off. She only said, "There's room." The shift was almost invisible, but Chad felt it like a crack in the foundation. He jumped onto a bench, ready to deliver another line, but his throat caught. He could see eyes already rolling, students already pulling out their phones not to cheer, but to capture his desperation. He climbed down, muttering, "Whatever," and slammed his tray onto the table. Basketball scrimmage. Chad was on one team, Amara on the other. She wasn't a star athlete, but she played steady defense, her movements careful and efficient. Chad tried to embarrass her, dribbling fast, trying to fake her out. He drove toward the hoop, laughing. But another boy stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Cut it out, Chad," the boy muttered. The ball rolled loose. Amara picked it up, passed it down court, and her teammates scored. The class cheered, not for her, not against him, just for the point. But Chad felt it like a verdict. His crown was slipping, his stage crumbling beneath his feet. Amara collected her books from her locker. The paint was gone, the surface clean. Yet in her mind, the red letters still lingered. She touched the door once firmly, as though claiming it. Layla appeared, smile bright. "Did you see? People are noticing. They're finally noticing." Amara nodded. "Small things." "Small things matter," Layla said. "One seat, one pencil, one nod in the hall, it adds up." Amara closed her locker. "Yes, it adds up." They walked together to the curb. Chad stood across the lot, glaring, his jaw tight. Tyler and Mason trailed behind, whispering. Their faces held uncertainty, as if loyalty to Chad was beginning to cost more than it gave. Amara didn't look. Twice. She stepped into the Charger where Vin was waiting. The car pulled away, leaving the school's noise behind. Vin stirred a pot on the stove while Amara set the table. He glanced at her expression, the subtle curve of satisfaction she rarely showed. "Better day?" he asked. "Smaller battles," she said. Vin nodded. "That's how wars are won." Over dinner, she told him about the pencil, the extra seats at the table, the blocked path on the basketball court. Vin listened, chewing slowly, his eyes warm. "See," he said. Truth doesn't arrive like lightning every time. Sometimes it seeps in like water through stone. Drop by drop, kindness shifts the tide. Amara wrote it down later in her notebook. Kindness is slow water. Fear is brittle stone. Layla texted, "People are pulling away from him. Tyler didn't even laugh today." Mason looked nervous. "It's happening." Amara answered with 2 words. "Not yet." She closed her phone, slid under the blanket, and let the day dissolve. She felt the cracks spreading in Chad's stage, the slow turning of the crowd, the pebbles adding up to something heavy. Tomorrow would not be the storm yet, but tomorrow was one step closer. The week began with a chill in the air. The leaves along Willow Street had started their slow turn, edges crisping with the early signs of autumn. Students shuffled into Northview, their chatter carrying the same hum as always. But under it, something darker was brewing. By now, everyone had felt the shift. The cafeteria incident, the painted locker, the clumsy attempts at jokes, all of them had left cracks in Chadwick Miller's throne, and cracks, once visible, spread quickly. Amara Johnson's silence had become its own kind of thunder, echoing louder each day. But truth, real truth, was still waiting in the wings. Amara arrived before most of the students. The halls were nearly empty, lockers standing silent in their rows. The fluorescent lights hummed, and her footsteps clicked softly against the tile. She wasn't alone for long. Layla Torres appeared, carrying her backpack heavy with books as always. But today she also carried something else, a small envelope. She held it like a secret too fragile to drop. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amara nodded. "It's time." Layla exhaled. "I stayed up all night, printed everything, the screenshots, the messages. I didn't keep the worst slurs, just the ones people will understand right away, enough to show who he really is." Amara reached for the envelope, then paused. "No, you should place it. If it comes from me, it's revenge. If it comes from nowhere, it's truth." Layla hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Okay, but you'll stand close, right?" "I'll be here," Amara said. The locker hall was still quiet when they approached Chad's locker. Its number gleamed faintly in the morning light. Layla opened the envelope and pulled out a small stack of papers, each one bearing evidence. Chad's own words, cruel jokes about classmates, sexist insults, racist comments that had slipped easily from his thumbs into his phone screen. They taped them carefully to the metal door, one after another, until the surface was covered, each sheet like a mirror, reflecting the truth he thought would never see daylight. Layla stepped back, heart pounding. "It feels dangerous." "Truth usually does," Amara replied softly. By the time the first wave of students arrived, the display was waiting. At first, only a few kids slowed their steps. They leaned in, read a line, frowned. Phones came out, snapping photos. One boy whispered, "He really said this?" Another replied, "Yeah. Look, it's his username. It's his words." The circle grew. By the second bell, half the hallway was gathered around. Murmurs spread faster than any teacher could contain. "This is messed up. He said that about Maya from track. He joked about pushing kids into lockers. No wonder she never reacted. Look at this." The buzz turned electric. Screens lit up, fingers tapped quickly, and the evidence multiplied across feeds. By the time Chad would arrive, his reputation was already unraveling in digital threads. Layla hovered close to Amara. "They're reading it. They believe it." Amara's eyes stayed steady on the locker. "They're not believing me. They're believing him. That's stronger." Down the corridor, Chad's laughter arrived before he did. his voice booming as he recounted some joke to Tyler and Mason. He rounded the corner, expecting the usual space to open before him. But instead, he found a crowd gathered around his locker. "Move!" he barked, pushing through. The crowd parted reluctantly, some glaring, some silent. When he reached the door, his grin froze. Pages of his own words stared back at him. His jokes, his cruelty, his false bravado, everything laid bare in black and white. "What the—" He yanked one page down, scanning it quickly, his face drained of color. "These are fake." But phones were already raised, recording his reaction. Students whispered, "That's his chat handle. That's his writing style. You can't fake that." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Dude." "Shut up," Chad snapped, ripping down another page. His hands shook. The sound of tearing paper echoed down the hallway. Amara stood a few feet away, silent. She didn't smirk, didn't speak, didn't gloat. She only watched, her expression calm, as if she had been expecting this scene all along. The crowd's noise swelled. No longer laughter, but judgment. The shift was visible. For the first time, the students weren't afraid of Chad. They were disgusted by him. The bell rang. Teachers stepped into the hall, drawn by the commotion. Principal Harris approached, frowning at the torn pages still clutched in Chad's hands. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "Someone's framing me," Chad shouted. "This is fake. None of it's true." But his voice cracked, too loud, too desperate. Harris snatched a sheet from a nearby locker door and scanned it. His brow furrowed deeper. "These are serious allegations, Miller. If these are your words, we need to address this immediately." "They're not mine," Chad insisted, but the crowd murmured otherwise. Students shook their heads, whispering, "It sounds exactly like him. He said that last week. We've heard him say stuff like this before." Truth had walked into the hallway, and fear had nowhere left to hide. Amara turned quietly, books in hand, and walked to class. The scene unraveled behind her. Chad's frantic denial, Harris's stern commands, the crowd's whispering disbelief. She didn't need to stay. She had already seen what she needed, power collapsing under the weight of its own words. That afternoon, she wrote in her notebook, "Truth doesn't shout. It simply arrives. And when it does, noise has no defense." She underlined the sentence once, closed the book, and let the stillness hold her. Tomorrow would bring the fallout, but for today, the truth had been enough. The story of Northview High changed in one morning. By the time the first period bell rang, the hallway outside Chadwick Miller's locker had become a stage that he no longer controlled. What had once been his throne now stood as a wall of paper, each page a window into his cruelty. Screenshots of late-night jokes, screenshots of group chat threads, screenshots of careless words tossed at people too quiet to defend themselves. They were no longer whispers or rumors. They were receipts, and receipts don't lie. Students pressed shoulder to shoulder, some craning necks to see over the heads in front, others raising phones high to record the scene. The words spread like fire. "Did you see what's on Chad's locker? Did you read it?" One sheet showed a cruel remark about a student who stuttered in class. Another page displayed Chad mocking a teammate for losing a game. Another carried a sexist jab about girls in gym. A few were worse, lines so sharp they made readers wince. "Wow," one boy muttered. "He really said that?" "I was in that chat," another whispered. "That's his handle, it's real." "No wonder she never answered him," a girl added, shaking her head. The hum of disbelief turned to anger. The laughter that had always followed Chad was gone. In its place was silence heavy enough to bruise. He pushed through the crowd with Tyler and Mason trailing behind. His voice boomed before he even saw the papers. "What's everyone staring at? Don't you have class?" Then he reached the locker. The grin fell from his face. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. His jaw clenched. "This is fake!" he shouted, ripping one sheet down. His voice cracked, the sound too sharp, too desperate. "Somebody's framing me." But the more he denied, the less believable he became. "Fake?" a sophomore scoffed. "That's your username. That's literally you." "I've heard you say this stuff out loud," another added. "Exactly like him," someone else said. Chad's face flushed red. He tore more pages, balling them in his fists, but new phones rose to record his every movement. Every denial was captured, every twitch of panic preserved. Tyler tried to laugh, but the sound was empty. Mason looked pale, his eyes darting to the floor. They had been his chorus, but even they seemed shaken. Principal Harris appeared, drawn by the noise. His shoes clicked sharply on the tile as he forced his way through the crowd. He stopped in front of Chad, holding up one of the crumpled pages, his brow furrowed. "Mr. Miller, what is this?" "Lies!" Chad barked. "Someone printed fake stuff to make me look bad." Harris scanned the paper. His face darkened. "If these are fabricated, we will determine that. But if they are real, this is a serious breach of school policy and basic decency." Chad's voice rose louder, almost shouting. "They're not real! I didn't write any of it!" But the crowd murmured otherwise. "We've seen him type that before. He said the same thing in the locker room. You can't fake this much." Harris looked around, gauging the room. The tide was clear. The weight of peer witness was heavier than one boy's denial. He straightened, his voice stern. "You'll come with me to the office, now." Chad slammed his locker shut, the metal clanging like a drumbeat of rage. "This is stupid! You're all sheep!" he yelled at the crowd, but his words no longer landed. They slipped to the floor like broken glass. Through it all, Amara stood a few paces away. She didn't film, she didn't jeer, she didn't even smile. She simply watched, eyes calm, posture steady, letting the storm spend itself. Layla stood beside her, trembling with adrenaline. "It's working," she whispered. Amara said nothing. She didn't need to. The power was no longer in noise, it was in silence. Her silence, the crowd's silence, the silence of students who had once laughed, but now stood still, ashamed of their part in the game. As Chad was led away, the crowd broke into fragments. Students whispered to each other, not with excitement, but with judgment. "I can't believe I laughed at his jokes. He made people feel small every day. I'm done following him." Even Tyler and Mason hung back, avoiding his eyes. For the first time, Chad walked without his shadows. By lunchtime, the receipts had spread beyond the school walls. Screenshots of the locker display flooded group chats and social feeds. Captions varied. "Chad exposed. About time. This is who he really is." The shift was permanent now. His reign had collapsed not with a punch, not with a fight, but with his own words reflected back at him. And Amara? She ate her sandwich at the window table as always. Students glanced her way, but not with pity, with respect. Some even nodded as they passed, unspoken acknowledgments of what they had witnessed. That evening, Amara sat across from Vin at the kitchen table. He had heard the story already. News traveled fast, even to parents who didn't hover. He looked at her steadily, So it happened. She nodded. The truth walked in. And it was enough. He leaned back, folding his arms. No gloating. No need, she said. The noise collapsed on its own. Vin smiled faintly. That's the thing about receipts. You don't have to argue. You just have to hold them up. Amara wrote in her notebook later. He tore the pages down, but they were already everywhere. You can't rip silence. You can't erase truth. The next day would bring the fallout. But for now, the story had turned. Chad's throne was rubble, and the crowd was walking away from him step by step. The following morning, Northview High hummed with a new kind of electricity. It wasn't the anticipation of a football game or the buzz before a holiday break. It was sharper, quieter, heavier. Students walked in pairs and small groups, their conversations darting in low tones that carried one name again and again: Chadwick Miller. The receipts from yesterday had already traveled beyond the walls of the school. Screenshots of the locker display had been copied, shared, and reshared in countless group chats. By now, nearly every student had seen them, even those who hadn't been in the hallway. There was no undoing it. Chad arrived late, his hair unkempt, his eyes shadowed from a night of little sleep. He walked through the door with his chin lifted, the way he always had, but the swagger looked brittle now, as if he were wearing a costume 2 sizes too big. The room went quiet. Not with fear, never again with fear. This silence was thick with judgment. A few students glanced up, then quickly down, unwilling to meet his eyes. Others simply watched, their faces set in the kind of disapproval Chad had never known. He tried to break the tension with a laugh. What? You all believe some fake screenshots? No one laughed. Even Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair, and Mason pretended to rifle through his bag. The teacher cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Mr. Miller, please take your seat. Chad slumped into the chair, muttering something under his breath. His words hit the desk but went nowhere else. Between classes, Amara walked her steady rhythm. She didn't seek attention, didn't change her path. Yet students moved aside for her now, the way they once had for Chad. They didn't say much, just nods, small acknowledgments, acts of quiet respect. Layla walked at her side, whispering, "Do you see it? They're turning away from him. He's nothing without them." Amara didn't gloat. She only said, "Fear doesn't last. Truth does." As they passed the stairwell, they saw Chad leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes darting at the students who walked by without stopping. He tried to catch someone's gaze, tried to ignite laughter with a smirk, but the faces around him were stone. One boy muttered as he passed, "You're not funny anymore." Another said, "You're done, Miller." Chad clenched his jaw, fists tightening until his knuckles blanched. The cafeteria was the true test. For years, it had been his kingdom, where he sat at the center table, where laughter swelled at his command. Today, he strode in with Tyler and Mason trailing behind, though even they seemed reluctant. He dropped his tray on the table loudly, trying to reclaim the sound of authority. "So," he said, voice pitched high, "this is what passes for entertainment now? Fake pages taped to a locker?" No one answered. Students at nearby tables ate in silence, eyes fixed on their food. "Come on," Chad pressed. "You all know this is garbage, right?" But his words fell into a pit that didn't echo. The crowd no longer belonged to him. Tyler forced a chuckle. "Yeah, totally fake, right?" His voice wavered. Mason shifted uncomfortably, stabbing at his food. One girl from the track team stood and said flatly, "You said the same stuff in person. Everyone's heard you." She picked up her tray and walked away. Others followed, leaving empty seats in their wake. The cafeteria, once his stage, had become a courtroom, and the verdict was clear: guilty and alone. Amara sat at her usual table by the window, quiet as always. She didn't turn toward him, didn't glance over, yet the absence of her gaze weighed more heavily on him than the stares of everyone else. Midway through the period, Harris entered the cafeteria. His expression was stern, his clipboard tucked beneath one arm. "Mr. Miller," he called across the room. Every head turned. "You'll come with me," Harris said. Chad tried to argue, his voice breaking. "This is ridiculous. I'm being set up." Harris's eyes were steel. "The evidence is clear, and multiple students have come forward. You will come to the office now." The command cut through the room like a knife. Chad hesitated, then shoved back his chair. The legs screeched against the floor. "Fine," he spat, though the word carried no weight. Tyler and Mason did not rise with him. They stayed seated, eyes lowered. For the first time, Chad walked alone. The cafeteria remained silent until the door closed behind them. Then, a ripple of relief passed through the room. Not laughter, but exhale. Chad's absence from practice was noted by everyone. Rumors flew that he had been suspended, that his parents had been called in, that he might lose his spot on the team. None of it mattered as much as the simple truth: his power was gone. Tyler and Mason drifted at the edges of groups now, trying to rebuild their places without him. They whispered excuses: "We didn't know, we didn't mean to," but students remembered their laughter, their echo of cruelty. The throne was not only empty, it was broken. Amara sat with Vin in the living room, the glow of the lamp soft against the evening. He asked gently, "So, how was the day?" She answered simply, "He walked alone." Vin leaned back, nodding once. "That's the sound of power collapsing." Amara folded her hands in her lap. "I didn't do anything." "Yes, you did," Vin said. "You endured. That's harder than fighting. You let the truth speak, and it spoke louder than any punch could have." She thought of the cafeteria, the empty seats, the silence that replaced laughter. She thought of Chad's face as Harris called his name, and she wrote in her notebook later that night, "Noise can fill a room, but truth empties it faster." The next day, she knew, would be quieter still. But in that quiet, something new would take root. Respect, dignity, a shift that no bully could erase. The following morning, Northview High hummed with a new kind of electricity. It wasn't the anticipation of a football game or the buzz before a holiday break. It was sharper, quieter, heavier. Students walked in pairs and small groups, their conversations darting in low tones that carried one name again and again: Chadwick Miller. The receipts from yesterday had already traveled beyond the walls of the school. Screenshots of the locker display had been copied, shared, and reshared in countless group chats. By now, nearly every student had seen them, even those who hadn't been in the hallway. There was no undoing it. Chad arrived late, his hair unkempt, his eyes shadowed from a night of little sleep. He walked through the door with his chin lifted, the way he always had, but the swagger looked brittle now, as if he were wearing a costume 2 sizes too big. The room went quiet, not with fear, never again with fear. This silence was thick with judgment. A few students glanced up, then quickly down, unwilling to meet his eyes. Others simply watched, their faces set in the kind of disapproval Chad had never known. He tried to break the tension with a laugh. "What? You all believe some fake screenshots?" No one laughed. Even Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair, and Mason pretended to rifle through his bag. The teacher cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Mr. Miller, please take your seat." Chad slumped into the chair, muttering something under his breath. His words hit the desk, but went nowhere else. Between classes, Amara walked her steady rhythm. She didn't seek attention, didn't change her path. Yet students moved aside for her now, the way they once had for Chad. They didn't say much, just nods, small acknowledgments, acts of quiet respect. Layla walked at her side, whispering, "Do you see it? They're turning away from him. He's nothing without them." Amara didn't gloat. She only said, "Fear doesn't last. Truth does." As they passed the stairwell, they saw Chad leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes darting at the students who walked by without stopping. He tried to catch someone's gaze, tried to ignite laughter with a smirk, but the faces around him were stone. One boy muttered as he passed, "You're not funny anymore." Another said, "You're done, Miller." Chad clenched his jaw, fists tightening until his knuckles blanched. The cafeteria was the true test. For years, it had been his kingdom, where he sat at the center table where laughter swelled at his command. Today, he strode in with Tyler and Mason trailing behind, though even they seemed reluctant. He dropped his tray on the table loudly, trying to reclaim the sound of authority. "So," he said, voice pitched high, "this is what passes for entertainment now? Fake pages taped to a locker?" No one answered. Students at nearby tables ate in silence, eyes fixed on their food. "Come on," Chad pressed. "You all know this is garbage, right?" But his words fell into a pit that didn't echo. The crowd no longer belonged to him. Tyler forced a chuckle. "Yeah, totally fake, right?" His voice wavered. Mason shifted uncomfortably, stabbing at his food. One girl from the track team stood and said flatly, "You said the same stuff in person. Everyone's heard you." She picked up her tray and walked away. Others followed, leaving empty seats in their wake. The cafeteria, once his stage, had become a courtroom, and the verdict was clear: guilty and alone. Amara sat at her usual table by the window, quiet as always. She didn't turn toward him, didn't glance over. Yet the absence of her gaze weighed more heavily on him than the stares of everyone else. Midway through the period, Harris entered the cafeteria. His expression was stern, his clipboard tucked beneath one arm. "Mr. Miller?" he called across the room. Every head turned. "You'll come with me," Harris said. Chad tried to argue, his voice breaking. "This is ridiculous! I'm being set up!" Harris's eyes were steel. "The evidence is clear, and multiple students have come forward. You will come to the office, now." The command cut through the room like a knife. Chad hesitated, then shoved back his chair. The legs screeched against the floor. "Fine," he spat, though the word carried no weight. Tyler and Mason did not rise with him. They stayed seated, eyes lowered. For the first time, Chad walked alone. The cafeteria remained silent until the door closed behind them. Then, a ripple of relief passed through the room. Not laughter, but exhale. Chad's absence from practice was noted by everyone. Rumors flew that he had been suspended, that his parents had been called in, that he might lose his spot on the team. None of it mattered as much as the simple truth. His power was gone. Tyler and Mason drifted at the edges of groups now, trying to rebuild their places without him. They whispered excuses. We didn't know. We didn't mean to. But students remembered their laughter, their echo of cruelty. The throne was not only empty, it was broken. Amara sat with Vin in the living room, the glow of the lamp soft against the evening. He asked gently, "So how was the day?" She answered simply, "He walked alone." Vin leaned back, nodding once. That's the sound of power collapsing. Amara folded her hands in her lap. "I didn't do anything." "Yes, you did," Vin said. "You endured. That's harder than fighting. You let the truth speak, and it spoke louder than any punch could have." She thought of the cafeteria, the empty seats, the silence that replaced laughter. She thought of Chad's face as Harris called his name, and she wrote in her notebook later that night, "Noise can fill a room, but truth empties it faster." The next day, she knew, would be quieter still. But in that quiet, something new would take root. Respect, dignity, a shift that no bully could erase. The office smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper. Sunlight slipped through the blinds in careful stripes across the carpet, as if the room itself believed in order. Principal Harris sat behind his desk with his hands folded, a stack of documents to one side, a glass of water to the other. He looked like a man who had spent years learning to keep his voice measured, even when the room ran hot. Across from him sat Amara Johnson, calm as ever, and beside her, Vin Diesel, shoulders set, presence quiet but unmistakable. The last chair was occupied by Chadwick Miller, who stared at a scuff on the floor as if it might offer an escape route. His parents were scheduled for later. For now, Harris wanted the four of them together, the harmed, the harmer, and the adults who could hold a boundary. Harris cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. I know this has been a difficult week." He glanced briefly at Amara's file, then closed it. "I asked for this meeting because the situation is bigger than simple discipline. We can and will apply consequences. But I'd also like to consider a path that repairs harm." Chad's jaw twitched. "So I'm getting punished and I have to apologize?" "Great." Harris did not rise to the bait. "Mr. Miller, I need you to listen, not just to me, to the people you hurt." Vin leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. "We're here because you're still part of this community, and communities don't become better by pretending harm didn't happen." Chad shot him a glance. It flickered with resentment, then fizzled. The glare he used to command in the hallway had no power here. Harris folded his hands again. "We have student statements and digital evidence. Still, I want the tone today to be honest rather than theatrical. If we make a spectacle, the lesson gets lost." He turned to Amara. "Miss Johnson, I'm sorry the school did not protect you sooner." The words came carefully, but they were not empty. "I'm prepared to recommend suspension and removal from extracurricular leadership. We can also explore a formal hearing, but I want your input. What outcome serves you, truly serves you, best?" Amara took a breath. It was not the sound of hesitation. It was the sound of choosing words with care. "I don't want a stage," she said. "I don't want revenge that turns into another performance. I want him to understand what he did, to make it right where he can, and to stop." Harris nodded. "Restorative practices can do that. They do not replace consequences. They add responsibility." He glanced at Chad. "It means you would face the people you harmed, acknowledge what you did, and agree to repair. It is not comfortable. It is not a shortcut." Chad scoffed. "You just want me to say sorry in front of everyone." Vin's gaze stayed even. "An apology is a door, not a destination." Amara looked directly at Chad, her voice low and steady. When you tripped me, when you painted my locker, when you joked about girls and weaker kids, you didn't just try to humiliate me. You told the whole school that cruel is normal. You made silence feel like permission. I want that undone. The words did not rise above a conversation's volume, but they landed with the weight of a verdict. Chad's eyes flicked up, then away again. Harris took a note and set down his pen. Here's my proposal. Suspension for a set number of days. Removal from captain's roles for the season. Loss of certain privileges. And a restorative circle. Facilitated, where you hear from the peers you harmed. You will also participate in service inside the school, not as janitor's punishment, but as visible repair. You will meet with our counselor. You will sign a commitment to non-retaliation and to specific actions. If you violate any part, we move to a formal hearing. Chad swallowed. And if I refuse, then we proceed with disciplinary measures alone, Harris said. They will be harsher, and they will still not fix what you broke. Silence hovered. The blinds ticked softly as the air conditioner clicked on. Vin turned to Amara. What do you want? She thought for a moment. I want the circle. I want him to hear not only me, but others. She looked back to Harris. I want a written apology delivered privately to the people he harmed. Not a show. I want him to give back time to the spaces he made unsafe. Help supervise a study hall where younger students work. Restock the library carts. Something useful. And I want a clear statement to the school that this ends now. Harris nodded slowly. All of that is reasonable. He looked to Chad. Mr. Miller? Chad stared at the carpet. For a long time, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was smaller than the hallway. Ever heard it? Everyone hates me now. What's the point? Amara answered before anyone else could. The point is not to get them to like you. The point is to stop hurting people. Chad's shoulders slumped. A long breath left him. I don't know how to do that circle thing. You listen, Harris said. You don't argue with feelings. You name what you did. You say who it hurt and how you will repair. You accept that trust takes time. And you do not expect applause. Chad risked a look at Amara. You want this? I want it finished, she said. I don't want to carry you with me into every hallway. Vin's voice came in warm and firm. Accountability is the opposite of humiliation. It's dignity for everyone. It says we're more than our worst moment if we do the work. Harris tapped the edge of the desk once, a small signal of decision. Then we proceed. I'll set the circle for tomorrow afternoon. Suspension begins after that. I'll coordinate service hours with Ms. Patel in the library and Mr. Rhodes in study hall. Written apologies will be due by the end of the week. You will meet with our counselor twice a week for this month. He paused. And, Mr. Miller, retaliation of any kind ends this agreement immediately. Chad nodded, barely. Okay. Harris turned to Amara. Is there anything else? She considered. Yes. I want it said out loud to the student body that reporting harm brings action. A short announcement. No names. Harris wrote it down. Done. We should have been clearer sooner. He met her eyes. For what it's worth, approximately 1 in 5 students reports being bullied. It should never be on the target to prove the harm alone. Amara held his gaze. Thank you. Harris stood, signaling the meeting's end. I appreciate all of you. This isn't easy work, but it is the right work. They rose. Chad lingered, then blurted into the small space between them. I will write the letters. The words were awkward, like shoes on the wrong feet. "I'll show up." "No more shows," Amara said gently. "Just show up." He nodded once, as if those 4 words had given him a script he had never tried. Honesty without audience. They filed out into the hallway, where the noise of passing periods pulsed again. The school looked the same. Lockers, shoes, voices, but the air felt cleaner, as if someone had opened a window. At the exit, Vin touched Amara's shoulder. "You did the hard thing today." She exhaled slowly. Hard things end better than loud things. They stepped into the afternoon light. The sky had brightened. Somewhere down the block, a bell chimed the hour. Not loudly, just enough to mark time turning toward repair. The next afternoon, the library's multi-purpose room was transformed into a circle. Not the kind drawn in chalk on a playground, but one made of chairs pulled into a wide ring, equal distance apart. No one sat at the head. No one stood at the front. That was the point. In a restorative circle, everyone's place was level. Principal Harris opened the door and motioned them in. "Take a seat wherever you like," he instructed. His voice was formal but softer than usual, as if the room itself demanded a gentler tone. Amara Johnson entered with steady steps, Layla Torres trailing beside her for support. Vin Diesel joined them, not as the actor the world knew, but as a father, present, protective, quiet in the background. On the far side, Chadwick Miller shuffled in, shoulders hunched. He sat heavily in a chair, his legs bouncing with nervous energy. Tyler and Mason were there too, though today they looked less like sidekicks and more like uneasy witnesses. A few other students who had been targets of Chad's words sat with folded hands, their eyes wary but determined. Principal Harris began, reading from a simple sheet. "The purpose of today's circle is accountability, not humiliation. Everyone will have a chance to speak. Everyone will have a chance to be heard. Interruptions are not allowed. When you speak, speak truth. When you listen, listen with respect." He set the paper down. "Let's start with the harm." A freshman boy cleared his throat, voice shaking. You made fun of me when I stuttered. You called me broken. People laughed. I still hear it in my head." Chad's eyes dropped to the floor. A girl spoke next. "You said girls can't play basketball. I quit trying out after that. I told my mom I didn't care, but I did. I cared a lot." Her voice broke. Silence filled the room. Layla leaned forward. "You made Amara your target every single day, and you wanted us to laugh. You wanted us to carry your cruelty for you." Amara did not add more. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. When Harris finally said, "Chad, it's your time to respond," the boy's foot tapped against the carpet so hard the sound echoed faintly. He swallowed. "I didn't think it mattered," he admitted, voice low. "Jokes. Just jokes. I thought that's how you stay on top. If people are laughing, you win. That's what I believed." He rubbed his hands together, restless. "But I see now. No one's laughing anymore. They look at me and they don't see a leader. They see..." His voice cracked. "They see the words I wrote, and they were mine. I can't pretend they weren't." Mason shifted in his chair. "We laughed because we didn't want to be next. That's the truth. But it was wrong. We backed you up when we should have walked away." Tyler nodded, shame flushing his face. "We thought it made us popular, but it just made us small." The honesty stung sharper than denial. For the first time, Chad looked less like a bully and more like a boy cornered by his own reflection. Harris leaned forward. "An apology is not magic, but it is a door. If you choose to open it, step through fully, not halfway. Chad's voice trembled. To the freshman, I'm sorry I made your stutter a joke. You're not broken. I was the broken one for needing someone else's hurt to make me feel tall. He turned slightly. To the girl who wanted basketball, I'm sorry I cut you down. I didn't want competition. That was my fear, not your failure. Finally, his eyes lifted toward Amara. They flickered, then steadied. And to you, I'm sorry. I wanted to make you small because your silence made me feel invisible. You didn't need my stage. I hated that. I'm sorry I painted my fear onto your locker. I'm sorry I tripped you, mocked you, tried to make your name into a punchline. He swallowed. I can't take it back, but I'll try to repair. I'll write the letters, I'll do the hours, and I'll shut my mouth when I should. The words hung in the air. They weren't eloquent, they weren't polished, but they were real enough. Amara's voice was calm, almost soft. I don't want revenge. I don't want you destroyed. I want you to stop hurting people. If you mean what you said, then live it, every day. Because words don't fix words, only actions do. The circle nodded in agreement. Even Harris looked moved. Then that is the agreement. Written apologies delivered by week's end. Service hours assigned. Counselor meetings scheduled. Suspension effective tomorrow. And a commitment that this ends here. Chad nodded. His face was pale, but his eyes no longer darted for escape. He had heard the verdict, not from authority alone, but from peers. As the circle broke apart, students filed out quietly. The freshman boy glanced once at Chad, then at Amara, and walked straighter than when he came in. The basketball girl looked determined. Layla touched Amara's shoulder, pride in her eyes. Vin placed a steady hand on his daughter's back. You carried yourself with dignity, he murmured. That's harder than carrying anger. Amara nodded, though she didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her victory wasn't about triumph. It was about restoration. Behind them, Chad lingered, folding one of the apology drafts in his hand. For the first time, he looked not like a performer searching for an audience, but a student facing the reality that the crowd had walked away and would only return if he learned to stand differently. That night, Amara wrote in her notebook, "Apologies are not crowns, they are doors. You walk through or you stay the same." He chose to open one. Time will show if he walks far enough. She closed the book and placed it by her bed. Outside, the sycamore tree stood steady, branches spread wide, reminding her that silence is not weakness. It is growth that takes its time. By the end of the week, the noise that had once wrapped itself around Northview High had faded. The echoes of cruel laughter, the taunts in the cafeteria, the smirks in the hallway, they were all replaced by something quieter. For Amara Johnson, quiet was not emptiness. It was space reclaimed. She walked through the front doors with the same steady rhythm she always carried, but the air around her felt lighter. Students shifted to the side as she passed, not out of fear, but out of respect. Some nodded, some smiled faintly, others simply made room. Layla Torres hurried up with her usual stack of books. "Big news," she whispered, breathless. "Chad's suspension starts today. He won't be back until next week at the earliest." Amara only nodded. "Good." Layla studied her. "That's it? No victory dance? No speech about justice?" Amara shut her locker with a soft click. "There's nothing to dance about. Quiet is enough." Layla exhaled with a laugh. "You're impossible, but I like it." The teacher called for volunteers to read their essays. For a moment, the room hesitated, glancing instinctively toward the seat where Chad usually lounged. It was empty. Finally, a girl near the window raised her hand, voice trembling as she began to read. Her classmates listened with an attentiveness they rarely offered before. Amara raised her hand next, not to prove a point, but because she wanted to share. She read her words softly, letting them flow like clear water. When she finished, the room was still for a heartbeat before the teacher said, "Thank you, Amara. That was thoughtful." The recognition was quiet, but it was enough. The cafeteria felt different without its self-appointed king. Students still laughed, still swapped snacks, still teased each other, but the air was free of the sharp edge that once dominated the space. Amara sat at her window table with Layla. Two other students joined them without hesitation. "Is it okay if we sit here?" one asked. "Of course," Amara said simply. They talked about homework, about a new movie, about nothing important. For the first time since her arrival, the lunch felt ordinary. Ordinary was victory. During free play, the basketball girl who had spoken in the restorative circle approached Amara. She dribbled the ball once, then held it out. "Want to try?" Amara shook her head. "Not really my game." The girl smiled. "That's fine, just thanks for saying what you said, for not letting him win." Amara nodded, accepting the gratitude without needing to hold it long. "You don't owe me thanks. You just keep playing." The girl laughed, then jogged back to the court. By the end of the day, Amara had noticed more small things. Someone offered her a place in the lunch line. Another student saved her a seat in math class. A boy she barely knew passed her a note in history. Respect. None of it was loud. None of it was dramatic. But each gesture was a stone laid quietly in the foundation of something new. Layla grinned as they walked out together. "See? People are finally getting it. They respect you now." Amara looked thoughtful. "They respect silence, not me. Silence taught them more than I could." Layla shook her head. Still impossible. Still right. That evening, Vin Diesel stirred sauce on the stove while Amara set the table. He watched her move with a steadiness that made him proud. "How was today?" he asked. "Quiet," she said. "Good quiet?" "The best kind." They sat down to eat. Between bites, she told him about the girl who thanked her, about the boy who passed her the note, about the students who sat with her at lunch. Vin listened, nodding, not interrupting. When she finished, he said, "That's the real victory. Not the suspension, not the exposure. Just life, lived without someone trying to make you smaller." Amara considered his words, then smiled faintly. "Yes, that's enough." That night, Amara wrote a single sentence before bed. No crown, no throne, just space to breathe. That is victory. She underlined it once, closed the book, and placed it on her desk. The moonlight painted silver lines across the cover. She lay down, listening to the hum of the house, the safety of walls that belonged to her. She thought of the cafeteria without jeers, of hallways without staged laughter, of a week beginning in quiet dignity. And with that thought, she let sleep come. Soft, calm, steady. The weekend arrived with the kind of evening that feels like a sigh. Sky dipped in violet. The air just cool enough to invite the windows open. Inside their home on Willow Street, the kitchen lights glowed warm against the settling dusk. Amara Johnson stood at the counter, chopping vegetables with careful rhythm. Across from her, Vin Diesel stirred a pan of garlic and onions, the smell filling the house like a promise of comfort. They moved around each other with the ease of two people who didn't need to talk much to understand one another. Vin tasted the sauce with a spoon, then made a face that was half dramatic, half genuine. "Needs more salt," he declared, as if announcing to a stadium. Amara rolled her eyes but passed him the shaker. "You always say that? And I'm always right." He sprinkled the salt with a flourish, then winked. She laughed, a sound rare at school but easy here. They worked quietly after that. She chopped tomatoes, slid them into the pot. He drained pasta, steam clouding the air. Together, they set the table with 2 plates, 2 glasses of water, and a small basket of bread warmed in the oven. They sat down. For a while, the only sounds were forks against plates and the soft hum of crickets outside the window. Then Vin said, "I heard about the circle." Amara nodded. It wasn't easy, but he listened, or at least he tried. Vin twirled pasta on his fork. Listening is harder than talking, especially for someone who thought noise was power. Amara thought back to Chad's face, pale and tight, as he muttered apologies. She had not believed every word, but she had believed the attempt. "He looked smaller," she said. "He wasn't smaller," Vin replied. "He was just his real size. Without the crowd, without the stage, that's who he's always been." They ate in silence again. The sauce was simple but rich, the bread crisp at the edges. Amara felt the weight of the week sliding off her shoulders with each bite. After dinner, Vin cleared the plates while Amara stacked them in the sink. Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a stack of DVDs, the covers worn and bent. "Pick one," he said. She flipped through them. Action films, comedies, even a few old black and white classics. She chose a comedy, one with ridiculous costumes and slapstick humor. Vin slipped it into the player. The screen flickered, filling the living room with soft light. They sat on the couch, the bowl of popcorn between them. For an hour, the world outside didn't matter. They laughed at the clumsy villains, the exaggerated chases, the jokes so old they felt new again. At one point, Amara leaned her head on Vin's shoulder. He didn't say anything, just rested his cheek gently against her hair. When the credits rolled, the room grew quiet again. The only light came from the lamp by the window. Vin spoke softly. "You know, the strongest wins aren't the ones people cheer for. They're the ones that don't cost your soul." Amara listened, the words settling into her. "Anyone can throw a punch," he continued. "Anyone can shout loud enough to drown a room, but it takes strength to walk through cruelty without becoming cruel. You did that. You kept your soul intact." Amara thought of the hallway, the cafeteria, the locker painted in red. She thought of the circle, of Chad's voice cracking as he apologized, and she thought of the small victories, an extra pencil offered, a seat saved, a quiet nod. "It didn't feel like strength," she admitted. Vin smiled faintly. "That's because real strength doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like breathing steady when the air is heavy. It feels like doing the right thing when no one's clapping." She turned her head, watching him. "Do you ever get tired of being patient?" "Every day," he said honestly. "But patience is cheaper than regret, and it's how we build something that lasts." Later in her room, Amara opened her notebook. She wrote, "The strongest wins are the ones that don't cost your soul." She underlined the sentence twice, then closed the book. The moonlight traced pale silver lines across her desk. As she got ready for bed, she thought of the week behind her. Not of Chad's downfall, not of the gasps when Vin had stepped from the charger, not of the papers taped to the locker. She thought instead of the small things, the smile from the basketball girl, the boy who wrote respect on a note, the quiet nods in the hall. Those were her trophies, invisible, ordinary, and enough. She pulled the blanket to her chin and listened to the night sounds, the steady hum of crickets, the low creak of the house settling into sleep. She closed her eyes with a sense of ease she hadn't felt in weeks. Tomorrow would come, as days always do, but tonight was hers. Quiet, safe, strong. The house is quiet now. The week has folded itself into memory. The noise of the hallways dimmed, the cruel laughter silenced, the storm finally spent. What remains is not spectacle, but stillness, and in that stillness lies the truth. This is where the story slows, where the narrator steps gently into the frame, not to add drama, but to gather the pieces, to hold them up to the light and ask, what do they mean? Chadwick Miller believed for years that noise was strength. He mistook the echoes of his jokes, the fear in others' eyes, the way the crowd parted for him as proof of power. But power built on fear is fragile. It cracks when silence refuses to echo it. It collapses the moment truth enters the room. He never lost because someone shouted louder. He lost because someone chose not to play his game at all. Amara Johnson stood in the center of his storm and did what many cannot imagine. She stayed calm. She did not hurl insults back. She did not swing fists or stage scenes. She let her silence grow heavier than his noise. And in that silence, he stumbled. Dignity does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it looks like refusing to answer cruelty with cruelty. Sometimes it looks like walking to your seat, eating your lunch, opening your notebook as if the whole world isn't watching. Amara's strength was not in spectacle. It was in patience. It was in her refusal to let someone else dictate her worth. Her father's words guided her. Patience isn't surrender. Silence isn't absence. Truth arrives in its own time. These weren't abstract lessons. They were daily practices, carved into the way she carried herself through crowded hallways and painted lockers. When the receipts appeared on the locker door, the truth arrived not as a scream, but as a steady light. Pages taped to metal. Screenshots of words that could no longer hide in private chats, a reflection too sharp to ignore. The crowd shifted instantly. Laughter turned to gasps, smirks turned to silence, loyalty turned to distance. The lesson was clear. The crowd had never truly belonged to Chad. It had belonged to fear. And when fear lost its grip, so did he. This is how truth works. It doesn't always come fast. It doesn't always come loudly. But when it arrives, it changes the room. One by one, students chose differently. A pencil slid onto Amara's desk, a chair pulled up at her lunch table, a seat saved in the classroom. These gestures looked small, but they built something larger. They built a community where cruelty no longer set the rhythm. Research tells us that about 1 in 5 students reports being bullied at school. Many more stay silent, watching, unsure. What Amara's story showed them is that silence can resist too. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of dignity. And when dignity stands long enough, others begin to join it. In the principal's office and in the circle, Amara made a choice. She could have asked for punishment alone. She could have asked for Chad to be expelled, removed, erased, but she asked instead for repair, for apology, for change. This was not softness. It was strength of another kind. It is harder to face someone and say, "I don't want you destroyed, I want you accountable." Harder, but more lasting. Chad's apology was shaky. His words were not polished. But he said them, and for the first time, he was not performing for a crowd. He was admitting to it. That is not redemption in a single day, but it is a beginning. Her victory did not look like a crown or a throne. It looked like studying in peace, laughing with Layla, eating her sandwich by the window without a shadow hovering over her. It looked like writing in her notebook at night, underlining sentences that only she would read. She did not need the crowd's applause. She did not need to become queen of the hallways. She only needed the space to be herself without someone trying to make her smaller. That was victory enough. The story of Northview High is not just about one bully and one girl. It is about the structures we build in our lives. Noise versus dignity, fear versus truth. It is about how quickly power crumbles when it leans only on intimidation. Fear may win a hallway for a time, but dignity wins a lifetime. Patience and truth are not fast weapons. They don't explode like fireworks. They move slowly, steadily, like water wearing down stone. But when the stone finally breaks, there is no repairing it. As the day ends, imagine Amara at her desk, notebook closed, room quiet, the sycamore tree outside standing tall. No cameras, no crowd, no spectacle, just calm, just dignity. And in that image lies the message. You don't need to shout to be strong. You don't need to humiliate to win. The quietest voice held steady can carry the loudest truth. The story begins with noise, but must end with quiet. That is the natural rhythm of truth. It enters like a whisper, grows into a presence, and finally settles as calm. Amara Johnson's journey through Northview High was never about spectacle. It was about endurance. It was about what happens when cruelty tries to write your story for you, and you choose not to hand over the pen. Imagine her now, walking through the hallway not with fanfare but with calm steps. Students part without jeers, without smirks. They make room not because they fear her, but because they respect her. Some nod, some smile, some stay quiet. All of it adds up to recognition, the kind that doesn't need posters or speeches. At her table in the cafeteria, the window light spills across her notebook. Layla sits beside her, laughing at something unimportant. A boy from math class passes and says hello. The ordinary hum of school life has returned, but this time it hums without cruelty's sharp edge. This is her victory. Not a throne, not a crown, just space to breathe. At home, her father leans back on the couch, a half-empty bowl of popcorn on the coffee table. The movie credits roll on the screen, but neither of them is watching. Vin looks at his daughter and says, "You know, the quietest wins are the ones you carry longest, the ones that don't cost your soul." Amara doesn't argue. She doesn't even answer. She just nods because she knows he is right. Later, when she writes in her notebook, she underlines it once. The quietest voice can carry the loudest truth. What happened at Northview is not rare. Around 1 in 5 students reports being bullied during their school years. Many more witness it, caught in the middle between laughter and silence. Too often, cruelty is mistaken for leadership and intimidation for power. But this story offers a different map. It shows that power built on fear collapses when the crowd withdraws. It shows that silence, when carried with dignity, can be stronger than noise. And it shows that truth, even when slow, always arrives. The message is simple but lasting. Patience and truth outweigh intimidation. What comes next for her is not drama. It is not headlines or endless retellings. It is the ordinary life she wanted from the beginning. Studying by the window, laughing with her friend, writing her thoughts at night while the sycamore tree sways outside. Her story is not about becoming the most popular, or about revenge, or about flipping the social ladder. It is about restoring balance. It is about proving that no one has the right to shrink another person to make themselves feel taller. And so her legacy is not loud. It is calm. It is steady. It is a lesson for anyone who listens. You don't have to outshout cruelty to defeat it. You only have to stand long enough for truth to catch up. As the narrator, I step back now and leave you with this. Power built on fear is a stage made of cardboard. It looks solid until the rain of truth touches it. Then it folds quickly, completely, and without dignity. But dignity, that survives. Dignity is not cardboard. It is stone. It is patient. It does not need applause. It does not fade when the spotlight moves away. Amara taught us this. By refusing to be defined by cruelty, she reminded us that silence, when chosen, is not weakness, but strength. That truth does not need to shout. That repair is greater than revenge. So now, as you sit with this story in your own quiet space, let it travel with you. Perhaps you remember a time when someone tried to make you smaller. Perhaps you've seen someone else carry that weight. Let this story remind you. Fear collapses, but dignity endures. And if you are listening tonight before sleep, let your heart rest on that. Let the noise of the day fall away, and keep only the steady truth. The quietest voice can carry the loudest truth. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. If this story gave you something to think about, you're welcome to subscribe and share it with someone who might need it. These stories live longer when they travel from one heart to another. The final image is simple. Amara's notebook rests closed on her desk. The sycamore outside sways softly in the night air. The house breathes in its sleep. Tomorrow will come, as it always does, but tonight, dignity holds the room, and that is enough.